Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to talk about the various campaign settings that have been established since AD&D. These are campaigns worlds that have been created since Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Some of them are shown more often than others, and of course the one I started with is one that we haven't seen truly in very great manner since 3rd edition, Spelljammer, Dungeons & Dragons Adventures in Space. Anyway, we've been talking about some of the rules in Spelljammers and rules related to ship, and in particular now, ship combat. So initiative of your ship. Once you've established your initiative, the highest initiative order, the best initiative, basically gets to choose whether they're going to go first in the round or last. Now this is something you would say is, why would you want to go last in the round? Well, because since you can react with all your weapons, this is a way that you can make your movements and not have to worry maybe about as many reactions. There's an advantage to going last, or going first in this case, because of the nature of ship combat. You might want to choose it. Then, going down in initiative order as the best initiatives, they get to choose where they position themselves, either at the other end of the spectrum, or second from the person that chose their thing. And we keep filling in the blanks until the initiative is established, and the lower end of the people don't get as much choice. Now, it is important to note that ships do not get any modifiers. Normally, your player characters, your NPCs that are doing individual things on the ship, will get their modifiers as normal to initiative, but the ships themselves can have some optional rules for initiative. These aren't things you don't normally just apply. If you do want to apply one, the recommended one is crew. I talked about having a green crew, having a crack crew, having everything in between. Depending on the type of crew, gives a modifier to your initiative. Basically, green crew gives a penalty, crack crew gives a bonus. Best bonus. Bonus of 2 to a penalty of 1. That way you can apply these bonuses to your ship based upon your crew. They're better at reacting. Now, these aren't the only ways you can do things. There are some optional rules which do appear in this book here based upon combat, especially things like turn order, selection, initiative. If you want to try to apply any of these are optional rules based on more classic AD&D games. So if you're playing AD&D, I would check them out. If you're playing something like 5th edition, been adapting Spelljammer, you may want to look at it for alternate way of looking at things, but keeping with the standard works pretty well when fitting it in. So think about what you want to do, and I will leave it up to you to check out the optional one. But let's dive into long-range combat, which I said before is battle between two hexes. This is when you get your ship's weapons, your ship's siege weapons, and missile combat. These are the two main things that are going to be occurring during this time. The point of long-range combat is to fire off volleys of weapons, combination between siege weapons and normal missile attacks on the enemy ship, and close distance. While this distance is closing, weapons are firing at each other. Now, siege weapons themselves, or missile weapons, either of them, when making their attacks, will do damage pretty much as normal to ship, to crew. I'll talk about the differences between small weapon, missile weapons, and siege weapons when it comes to damaging ships later on. But consider that you are still trying to damage the ship or the crew separately. The thing is, you have to determine, once you're making this attack, if you're targeting crew, targeting ship. You cannot target both of them. You have to make a conscious choice, whether if I'm at the helm of this catapult, if I'm going to try to hit the captain or some other crewmate, or if I'm going to try to hit the ship itself and try to damage that. So large weapons in particular deal either hit points or hull points, depending on what they hit. Large weapons are made more for attacking another hex. In particular, catapults can't attack in the same hex. So yes, I could hit a ballista, hit something in the same hex as me, that's an option, but catapults have a sort of minimum distance they have to travel. You can't hit in the same hex. Now, when I'm attacking a ship and I choose to attack crew, I could indiscriminately attack a crewmate, in which it will be determined randomly, or I could attack one of my choice. Any crew that's on deck or in some way exposed could be target for me to hit. As long as I can see a portion of them, they're standing out on deck, they are a target. That means if the captain's out there, I could target the captain. If someone else that looks important's out there, I could target them. Or again, just generalized attack. When I attack a target on deck, I compare my attack to their AC, not the ship's AC. I'm looking at their defenses and how hard it is to hit them. If I miss that target, I can still do something with this attack. I compare my attack to the ship's AC, to the ship's hull. If I've managed to hit the ship after I missed the target that's on deck, then I do the ship 1 hull point, maximum. That's it. I just do a hull point of damage if I miss them, because I was targeting that person. They're on the ship. I still hit the ship. It just does minimum damage because I didn't have a direct attack on it. It's sort of indirectly hitting the ship, not getting the full direct hit. So you will still do some damage. But again, you will have to have missed the target you were trying to hit and not gotten low enough that you still hit the ship. So there's this sweet spot in the middle. Now, any modifiers to attack rolls that you could get to any character on the ship would apply to your attack rolls against anything that you're fighting there. So it's important to note that modifiers I'm getting, I would apply to my normal missile attack or to the catapult I'm firing. And soft cover and hard cover both apply, so you'll have to keep an eye out on those if you're getting covered rules. The final thing about this little section here is damage is damage. Whatever damage a large-scale weapon does, it does the same amount of damage to both the vessel in the form of hull points and to the target in form of hit points. It is not changed or unmodified. I do the same. Now, hull points are in a lot of ways like hit points. If hull points of your ship is reduced to 0, it starts breaking apart. As I said, for large-scale weapons, they deal damage both to the hull and to hit points exactly the same. The exception comes into my small-scale weapon, my small-scale missiles, or even perhaps melee attacks if I get close enough. These don't directly do hull point damage. I still am doing damage to the ship, but every 10 points of damage I deal to the exact same spot does 1 point of hull damage. That's the important iteration here, the exact same spot. That means if I'm hitting it with an axe, I can easily concentrate on this single spot, and every 10 damage I do, 1 hull point. On the other hand, if a volley of arrows hits the side of a ship and each of them do 7 damage, then no damage was done to the ship. Across the board, it's not the same spot with that. You have to concentrate your fire, and that can be more difficult in ranged attacks like bows and crossbows. That's why the melee attacks is a lot easier for this. Not that you can't get it with bows and crossbows, just more difficult. Regardless, once my ship reaches 50% of its normal health, I suffer a critical hit. Let's talk about critical hits. There are many different varieties of critical hits that can occur to a ship. It's sort of random how a critical ship will affect it. Siege weapons, basically my ship weapons, can score critical hits. My normal weapons that I'd be firing on the ship can't. But they still can cause a critical hit if I concentrate fire and get the ship to half health. Then I'm still scoring a critical hit. It is a D20 roll, and that will determine what the critical hit effect is. It's important to note here that if this effect has already occurred to my ship so it cannot stack with itself, or it's an effect that would not affect my ship whatsoever, I ignore it. I look to the next one down, or if I'm at 20, I circle back to 1 and start looking at that end of the chart again. I will effectively take all the criticals at one point in time, or I could. Your ship will be horribly maimed, and the thing is, it just has to be able to affect the ship in some way. It doesn't say how critically damaging this critical would be. It can be, or it could be just a mere minor effect. As long as it can physically do something, this type of critical to your ship, it will apply. That's why I'm saying, like, you can't get certain things more than once, and certain things, if your ship doesn't have that, won't affect it whatsoever. So that's when you ignore those critical hits. But that's it for today. So I dove deeper into combat with your ships in Spelljammer. Finished talking about initiative, started diving into long-range combat, and talked about how your siege weapons affect the other ship. Because remember, this is mainly long-range combat, but your siege weapons, your ship weapons, can be fired, say for the catapult, at your close combat. So you will even have to remember some of these rules then. They will carry over. But regardless, in the next episode, we are going to go over those types of criticals and what they do, because some of them, you'll need to understand them. Some of them are pretty simple, straightforward. Destroy your enemy's helm. That's pretty straightforward. Others, not so much. So we'll go over them. We'll talk about your ship breaking up. Second herb, your ship could reach 0 hit points. And we'll talk about, of course, losing crewmates. Because we sort of talked about that when it came to your movement. Let's talk about it when it comes to combat, when all of your crew starts dying off from weapon attacks. But I hope you're having a great day, and until the next time, I bid you farewell.